Okay, our recipe today is my favorite breakfast of all time. It's a Singaporean Malaysian favorite, kaya toast. There's kind of two kinds of kaya. There's a very pandan-y type that's quite green, but I prefer the type that I'm gonna make today. My family's Hainanese, so this is Hainanese kaya. It's the kind that you would get in a Hainanese coffee shop all through Malaysia and Singapore. And it's very dark brown and caramelly. Hope you've got your stirring arm ready because there's a lot of stirring involved. These are the ingredients we need. We've got 10 eggs, about 600 grams of sugar, 3 pandan leaves, and of course, some coconut cream here. And then for later, a little bit of butter, and also some extra sugar as well. I'm gonna start with my eggs. It's always a good idea when you're using a lot of eggs to crack them into a separate bowl rather than straight into whatever you're using, because if you get any shell or if an egg's bad, it means you've only lost one egg rather than the whole lot. Now that the eggs are in there, it's time to add the sugar. And once you add the sugar, you want to start stirring straight away because the sugar can otherwise cure the egg and get little bits in your kaya, which I don't like at all. I know it seems like a lot of sugar, but let me tell you, my grandmother's traditional recipe for this is 1 kilo of sugar to 10 eggs, and that is a lot of sugar. This is just slightly more than half of that. A really important thing to remember with this stirring process is that it is actually stirring, not whisking. I'm not moving the whisk up and down to incorporate air into it. In fact, I want as little air in this as possible to make it as dense and creamy as possible. So I'm just stirring around and around, just in one direction so I don't agitate it too much. I want to keep stirring it probably for about 20 minutes until this sugar is mostly dissolved. This is looking pretty good now. The important part really is to break up the protein of the egg, so the white and the yolk are completely mixed together. There are still a few little bits of sugar, but that's not too much of a problem. When it goes into the heat, then they'll dissolve fairly quickly, so I'm not too worried about those. So it's time to add my other ingredients. I've got coconut cream here. Now this is really important. A lot of these cans will say to shake them before use, but when you're making kaya, you don't want to do that. The reason they say to shake it is because the top of this is actually going to be a very thick, dense coconut cream or coconut fat, and then under that there's going to be coconut water, and actually we only need this top layer. So without turning the can over, I'm just going to scoop out this dense coconut cream from the top and try and leave as much of the coconut water underneath as I can. If you don't want to go through the process of scooping out this coconut cream, that's completely fine because you can just add the whole can in. It'll just take a little bit longer on the stove to cook it out. Now this leftover coconut water in here is still quite creamy, so this is actually really good for a curry or something like that, so don't throw that out. Just stir that together. And my last ingredient here is pandan. It's got a really lovely aroma pandan. Some people say it's a bit like vanilla, and it is kind of like vanilla, but it's unique in and of itself. The way to use it is you just get these leaves and tie them in a couple of knots. This does two things. It makes it easier to stir so that you don't have two long threads of pandan going over, and also actually the process of tying, if you can hear that, breaks up the pandan a little bit so that more of the pandan flavour will get into our kaya. Now I'm still only stirring in one direction and I'm not lifting the whisk up because I still don't want to beat it too much. Now it's time to put it on the stove. So I've just got a big pot, about 1/3 full of water. You don't want to put too much in, otherwise it'll overflow once you put the other pot in there. And this is going to act like kind of a double boiler. To make sure I don't get too much heat just from the base, I'm going to put a tea towel in the water and then drop my pot on top. Now I'll bring the water to a simmer and just keep stirring. You don't have to constantly stir it, but every couple of minutes, give it a stir to make sure that you're not overcooking around the edges of the pot. And what we're looking for is this to get really quite thick as the egg starts to coagulate. I told you it was a long process. You don't need a thermometer, but if you've got one, you're actually trying to get the egg up to about 80 degrees. So you can keep checking the temperature of the eggs in the center to make sure that we are getting to that temperature. But don't let the thermometer rule what you do, because you're trying to watch until it gets really quite thick in here, because when it cools down, it'll become that jammy consistency. Our last step is just to add a caramel. I'll start with some sugar in a small saucepan. Just put that over heat. No stirring, no touching, until it becomes a very dark caramel. So I'll just drop in the butter and whisk that together. Now this is the best part of the whole process. Whisking constantly, pour the hot caramel into the kueh, you can really see how this changes the color immediately. That looks great. I'll turn the heat off, take the pot out, let that cool to room temperature, and I can put it into jars and we can make kaya toast. It looks fantastic. And to get it out into the jars, it's a bit of a process. You need a jam funnel and a spatula. It can be slightly messy, but bear with it. And there you go. That's how you make Hainanese kaya for all of your kaya toast needs. And if you want to know a couple of different ways of how to make kaya toast, there's another video coming right up.